My husband called me paranoid and swore I needed therapy for suspecting him. I believed him, assuming the elderly woman across the street just sat on her porch because she was bored. I was wrong. For 2 years, while he lied to my face, she was documenting every single betrayal in a thick notebook. When that book landed in court, draining the color from his face, I realized my neighbor held the power to destroy him. My name is Harper Quinn, and if you asked my 11th grade students at Northwind Charter Academy to describe me, they would probably say, I am the lady who tries way too hard to make the Industrial Revolution relevant to their TikTok algorithms. Being a 32-year-old history teacher in Riverton, Colorado, means spending my days confiscating iPhones and reading essay drafts where the American dream is described as becoming an influencer with a six-figure sponsorship deal. I love them, mostly, even when they roll their eyes at my enthusiasm. It is a chaotic, loud, and exhausting job, but at least with teenagers, you know exactly when they are lying to you, usually because they are terrible at it. My husband, Gavin Blake, was much better at it. Gavin was 35 and the sales director at Skyline Vista Realty Group. He was the kind of man who could sell a house with a leaking roof and make the buyer feel like they were getting a water feature for free. He was polished, handsome in that catalog model way, and possessed a voice that made grandmothers blush and bank managers approve loans. He was perfect, or at least the version of him that walked out the door every morning in a crisp navy suit was perfect. We lived in a neighborhood where conformity was not just encouraged, but practically zoned into the property deeds. Every lawn was cut in the same diagonal stripe pattern. Every backyard smelled of propane and marinated chicken on Saturday evenings. The only anomaly in our beige and greige existence was the pale yellow house directly across the street. That was where Evelyn Rhodes lived. Evelyn was pushing 70 and spent her retirement engaging in the Olympic sport of porch sitting. She was always there, settled into her wicker chair with a glass of sweating iced tea and a thick, leather-bound notebook on her lap. I assumed she was just another lonely retiree filling her days with crosswords, or perhaps writing a memoir that nobody would ever read. I used to joke about her to the other teachers in the staff room. "Oh, my marriage is fine," I would say with a laugh that was a little too bright. "It is just me. I am a little neurotic. I see shadows where there are none." I believed it, too. I had convinced myself that the knot in my stomach was my fault. It was easier to believe I was broken than to look at the cracks in my life. Whenever I brought up Gavin coming home 3 hours late or the phone calls he ended the second I walked into the room, he would look at me with those soft, pitying eyes. "Harper, honey," he would say, his voice dripping with patience. "You are imagining things again. You are just stressed." But I heard a woman's voice. I would stammer. "That was the radio," he would reply, chuckling as if I were a child afraid of a monster under the bed. "Seriously, babe, you need to cut back on those true crime podcasts. They are rotting your brain." He made me feel small. He made me feel crazy. And every time I looked out the window, Evelyn would be there. She would look up from her notebook and stare right at my house. Her gaze was not hostile, but it was intense. It felt like she was looking through the siding and the drywall, right into the messy living room where I stood wringing my hands. I told myself she was just a nosy old woman with nothing better to do than watch the neighbors. I think part of me wanted to be blind. My mother had passed away a few years ago, leaving a silence in my life that was deafening. Without her, I felt untethered. Gavin was the only anchor I had left. I clung to the idea of us because the alternative was floating away into nothingness. I needed this family to work. I needed him to be the good guy. I remember one specific Tuesday evening vividly. Gavin and I were sitting at the dinner table eating takeout because I was too exhausted to cook. He was regaling me with a story about a client who demanded a house with a feng shui certified garage. The guy was a total nightmare, Gavin said, laughing as he skewered a piece of broccoli. But I handled him. I always do. His phone sat on the table between us, face down. It always was these days. It vibrated against the wood, a dull, rhythmic buzzing. Aren't you going to get that I asked? He didn't even glance at it. No. Work can wait. Tonight is about us. He smiled, and for a second, I wanted to believe him. I looked out the window. Across the street, the porch light was on at the yellow house. Evelyn was there, pen moving steadily across the page of her notebook. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I tried keeping a journal once. I said, trying to fill the silence after the buzzing stopped. I gave up after 3 days. Good thing, Gavin said, taking a sip of wine. I hate paper, clutter. Digital is the only way to go. Leaves less mess. I nodded, thinking he meant environmental waste. I watched Evelyn turn a page, her hand moving with a deliberate, terrifying patience. I did not know it then, but she was not writing a memoir. She was writing my husband's obituary, one line at a time. It started with the smell. It was faint, a lingering trace of jasmine and heavy musk clinging to the collar of his dress shirt as I threw it into the laundry basket. I do not wear jasmine. I am allergic to it. When I asked him about it, Gavin did not even blink. He just continued tying his tie in the mirror, adjusting the knot with practiced precision. Oh, that, he said, his voice smooth and unbothered. I gave a ride to a client, Mrs. Gable. She is about 80 and bathes in the stuff. It gave me a headache all afternoon. It sounded plausible. Gavin always had a plausible answer, like the time I found a Starbucks cup in the passenger door of his sedan with a faint rim of berry-colored lipstick on the lid. Gavin, I had asked, holding the cup up like a piece of contaminated evidence. Who drank this? He laughed, a short, sharp sound that made me feel foolish for asking. Mrs. Henderson. She spilled her latte everywhere when we went over the closing documents. I told you about her. Remember the one with the shaky hands? You are forgetting things again. Harper. I nodded, crushing the cup and throwing it into the recycling bin. I must have forgotten. I was tired. Teaching 150 teenagers a day drained my brain power. Then came the late-night texting. I was sitting at the kitchen table, grading terrible essays on the Great Depression, when his phone lit up on the counter. It was past 11 at night. He snatched it up before I could see the screen, angling his body away from me. Who is texting you this late? I asked, trying to keep my voice light, trying not to sound like the nagging wife he hated. Just the work group chat, he said, his thumbs flying across the screen. The market never sleeps. Babe, you should relax. You look tense. I tried to talk to him about it a week later. I sat him down and tried to explain the knot in my chest, the constant humming anxiety that something was wrong. He looked at me with that pitying expression, the one that made me feel about 2 inches tall. Are you having your period? He asked, tilting his head. You get so emotional around this time of the month, honestly? Harper, you sound like one of those bitter women in those Facebook groups, the ones who hate their husbands just for breathing. I felt a flush of shame crawl up my neck. I went to a therapist once after that, just once. She suggested I keep a list of objective facts to separate my anxiety from reality. I started a note on my phone, typing out dates and times, but I deleted it 10 minutes later. It felt dirty. It felt like I was betraying him. But Evelyn noticed. I started seeing her watching him more intently. Gavin would leave the house at odd hours, claiming he had an emergency showing or a contract that needed a wet signature right that second. As his car backed out of the driveway, I would look across the street. Evelyn would be there, staring at his retreating taillights. One evening, as I stood by the window watching him leave at 9 at night on a Tuesday, Evelyn looked up. She locked eyes with me across the dark street. She gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It was a gesture that screamed validation. It said, "You are not crazy." I pulled the curtains shut and turned away. I did not want her pity. Then the money started getting tight. When the transmission on my 10-year-old sedan started slipping, Gavin shut down the idea of a trade-in immediately. "Money is tight this year. Harper," he said, looking at his spreadsheets. "The market is soft. We need to be careful." Yet, when I looked at the joint account statements, I saw withdrawals. $200 here, $300 there, all in cash, all at ATMs near the city center, nowhere near his office. When I brought it up, he exploded. It was the first time his mask slipped completely. "You are ruining this marriage," he shouted, slamming his hand on the granite island. "You are obsessed. It is those damn podcasts you listen to. You think every man is a liar and a cheat because you fill your head with garbage. Not everyone is a villain. Harper, sometimes. You are just the problem." I retreated. I stopped asking. I started typing notes into my phone again, hiding in the bathroom, recording that he smelled like vanilla vape smoke when he came home, even though neither of us smoked. Then I would look at the words on the screen, feel a wave of nausea, and delete them. I am a witch hunter, I told myself. I am the crazy wife. That night, unable to sleep, I crept downstairs and looked out the living room window. The street was silent, but across the way, a single lamp was burning on the porch. Evelyn was still there. Her pen was moving furiously across the page of that thick notebook. She stopped, looked up at the moon, and then went back to writing. I watched her, feeling a cold dread settle in my bones. "God," I whispered to the empty room, "when I end up like her. That is when I will know I have truly lost my mind." It was a Monday afternoon, the kind of gray, lifeless day where time seems to drag its heels. I was on my knees in the bedroom closet, digging through a pile of laundry in search of a matching sock, when my hand brushed against an old Nike shoebox tucked in the far corner. It felt heavy, heavier than empty cardboard should feel. I pulled the lid off, expecting to find old receipts or maybe a stash of forgotten chargers. Instead, I found a phone. It was a cheap, black pay-as-you-go model, the kind you buy at a gas station for $30. But that was not what made my stomach drop through the floor. It was the heat. The screen was still warm. I sat there on the carpet, holding the plastic device like it was a live grenade. My fingers trembled so hard I almost dropped it. I pressed the home button. No passcode. Of course not. Why lock a door when you have convinced the only other person in the house that she is too crazy to even turn the handle? The screen lit up, and the messages flooded my eyes. "Miss you." Read a text from a contact saved simply as a peach emoji. "Same hotel tonight. Room 304 asked someone listed as M. Can't wait to feel you later," said another, saved as a single letter K. My ears started ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I felt like I was floating outside my body, watching a stupid, gullible woman discover that her entire life was a joke. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. But mostly, I just sat there, scrolling through weeks of filth, realizing that while I was grading papers on the Civil War, my husband was fighting a war on 3 different fronts in 3 different beds. The rumble of the garage door opening snapped me back to reality. Gavin was home early. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my chest. I fumbled for my own phone and snapped 3 blurry photos of the screen, my hands shaking so bad I could barely frame the shot. I shoved the burner phone back into the shoebox, buried it under a stack of winter sweaters, and stood up just as I heard his footsteps on the stairs. "Hey, babe," he called out, his voice cheerful, oblivious. I beat the traffic. I managed to walk out of the room without collapsing, though my legs felt like jelly. I waited until dinner. I waited until he was cutting into his steak, talking about interest rates. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the burner phone which I had retrieved while he was showering, and slid it across the table. It hit his placemat with a dull thud, "What is this?" "Gavin," I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at the phone. He didn't flinch. He didn't pale. He just looked at it, then looked at me, and let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You found the test unit?" he asked, shaking his head. "I told the IT guys not to bring this home." "Test unit," I choked out. "Gavin, there are messages. Explicit messages. From women." He sighed, putting his knife down with a clatter. "Harper, come on. It is a marketing test for a new SMS app we are developing for client retention. The guys at the office send fake texts to test the server load and the filter keywords. You think peach emoji is a real person? It is a code. That doesn't make sense," I stammered, tears stinging my eyes. It felt real, the way they talk. His face hardened. The charm evaporated, replaced by cold disappointment. "So you went snooping. You went digging through my personal work equipment because you are so paranoid you can't trust your own husband, Jesus." "Harper, this is why I said you needed help. You are invading my privacy and sabotaging my career over a software test." He slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "I am exhausted. I work 12 hours a day to pay for this house, and I come home to this." To an interrogation, I shrank back. The doubt crept in, insidious and familiar. Maybe I didn't understand tech. Maybe I was reading too much into it. I am sorry," I whispered, staring at my plate. "I just thought—" "You didn't think," he snapped. "That is the problem. I slept on the sofa that night. Or rather, I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan. At 2 in the morning, feeling a mix of rage and shame, I opened my laptop. I typed an email to a firm called Alvarez and Trenton Family Law. A colleague had mentioned them once. The next morning, I sat across from Monica Alvarez. She was a woman in her 40s with hair cut sharp enough to draw blood and a suit that cost more than my car. "So?" Monica said, leaning forward, her pen hovering over a yellow legal pad. "You say he is cheating. Multiple partners. Financial abuse. Do you have proof? And I mean real proof, Harper." "Not I feel or he acted weird. I need something I can put on a judge's desk." I pulled out my phone and showed her the 3 blurry photos I had taken of the burner phone screen. Monica looked at them for a long moment, then slid the phone back to me. Her expression was pitying but firm. "This is nothing," she said bluntly. "He will say you faked them. He will say it is a work phone, just like he told you, without the device itself, or bank statements linking him to those hotels, or a witness. He will crush you. But I saw it. I pleaded, my voice cracking. I held it. "It doesn't matter what you saw," Monica said, her voice softening slightly. "It matters what we can prove. And right now, against a man like Gavin, you are walking into a gunfight with a plastic spoon." I walked out of her office into the blinding sunlight of the parking lot. I felt hollow. I had seen the truth, held it in my hands, and yet I was completely powerless. I was trapped in a cage of my own making, and Gavin had the only key. I was the crazy wife, and he was going to win. That evening, I was sitting on the living room floor, staring at the wall as if it might spontaneously grow a door I could escape through. The silence of the house was suffocating. Then, a sharp knock shattered it. I opened the front door to find Evelyn standing there. She was wearing a floral housecoat and clutching a battered, blue metal Danish butter cookie tin against her chest. She looked like every sweet grandmother in every movie ever made, except for the look in her eyes. It was sharp, clear, and terrifyingly lucid. "Girl," she said, her voice raspy but steady, "that lawyer of yours." She asked for evidence. Didn't she? I stood there, mouth slightly open, too stunned to lie. Evelyn didn't wait for an invitation. She walked past me, marched into the living room, and set the tin down on the coffee table with a heavy thud that sounded nothing like cookies. Sit down, she commanded. I sat. She pried the lid off. Inside, there were no sugar-dusted pretzels. Instead, the tin was packed tight with 3 thick, spiral-bound notebooks, their spines cracked from use, along with a silver USB drive and a stack of glossy photographs held together by a rubber band. I stared at the stash, half wanting to laugh because it was so absurd. Evelyn, are these recipes? Recipes for disaster, she replied dryly. She pulled out the first notebook. It had a neon yellow sticky note on the cover that read, Year 1. The one beneath it said, Year 2. I spent 30 years as a special investigator for the federal government in DIC. Harper. Fraud Division. I tracked money laundering and asset concealment for people who were much smarter than your husband. My brain short-circuited. You were a Fed retired, she corrected, smoothing her housecoat. I came to Riverton to rest, or so I told people, but I didn't pick this street by accident. She looked at me, her expression softening for the first time in 2 years. Your grandmother, Margaret. We were best friends in college. Before she passed, she called me. She was worried about you. She said, Evelyn, my Harper is too soft. She trusts too much. She thinks the world is as good as she is. Promise me you will keep an eye on her. I felt a lump form in my throat, hot and painful. Grandma sent you. She asked me to watch, Evelyn said, tapping the notebook. And it took me about 3 weeks of watching to realize your husband operates exactly like a mid-level Ponzi schemer. The cash withdrawals, the burner phones, the way he checks his mirrors when he backs out of the driveway. I reached out and took the top notebook. My hands were trembling. I opened it to a random page near the middle. October 14th, 2:45 in the afternoon. Subject Gavin Blake. Vehicle gray sedan. Location Starling Motel. Route 9. Accompanied by female, approx. 25, blonde, red coat. Notes. Subject removed wedding ring and placed it in cup holder before exiting vehicle. Subject laughed. Physical contact observed hand on lower back. I read the words, and the air left my lungs. It was clinical. It was precise. It was my life falling apart, documented in neat, cursive blue ink. Turn the page, Evelyn said softly. I did. Taped to the back of the page was a photograph. It was taken from a distance, likely from a car window, but the zoom was incredible. It showed Gavin standing outside a motel room door, his head thrown back in laughter, his arm draped around a woman I had never seen before. On the back of the photo, in Evelyn's handwriting, was the date, time, and GPS coordinates. I only document what happens in public view, Evelyn said, her voice matter-of-fact. Sidewalks, parking lots, public parks. No invasion of privacy, no peeking in windows. This is all admissible. It is court-ready. She slid the USB drive across the table until it hit my hand. What is this? I whispered. That, Evelyn said, leaning back and crossing her arms, contains Excel spreadsheets of his timeline cross-referenced with your joint bank account withdrawals. I also made a graph showing his spending habits on dates versus your birthday and a map of his movements for the last 18 months. I looked at the little silver stick, then at the mountain of notebooks. I looked at the woman I had dismissed as a bored, nosy neighbor. Why didn't you tell me sooner, I asked, my voice cracking. Because you weren't ready to believe it, Evelyn said. You had to find that phone first. If I had shown you this 6 months ago, you would have called me a crazy old bat and told him everything, and he would have destroyed the evidence. She stood up and patted my shoulder. It was a firm, grounding touch. Take it to your shark of a lawyer. Honey, Evelyn said. Tell her the crazy lady across the street says hello, and that she might want to look at the tab labeled Shell Companies on that drive. Walking into Monica Alvarez's office with a battered tin of Danish butter cookies felt ridiculous, like I was bringing a snack to a funeral. But when I set it on her mahogany desk and popped the lid, The atmosphere in the room shifted from sterile legal consultation to a war room briefing. Monica put on her reading glasses and flipped through the first notebook. Her eyebrows climbed higher with every page. She traced a finger down a column where Evelyn had recorded mileage logs that contradicted Gavin's expense reports. "Harper," Monica said, looking up over her rims. "This is aggressive. This is not the work of a bored retiree. This is the work of a private detective agency disguised in a floral housecoat." She plugged the silver USB drive into her laptop. We huddled around the screen as the files popped up. It was humiliatingly organized. There were folders labeled Affair 1, Affair 2, and Cash Withdrawals. But the kicker was a color-coded bar chart Evelyn had created. "Look at this," I whispered, a hysterical bubble of laughter rising in my throat. She made a graph. It was a comparison chart. The blue bar represented the amount Gavin had contributed to our joint retirement fund over the last 2 years. The red bar, which was roughly 3 times higher, represented untraceable cash withdrawals and credit card charges at restaurants I had never stepped foot in. In legal terms, we call this dissipation of marital assets, Monica said, her voice turning sharp. Usually, adultery in a no-fault state is just sad. Judges do not care about broken hearts. But spending community property, your money, to fund his affairs, that is theft. That is actionable. Harper, this notebook is a nuclear missile in family court. I stared at the red bar on the screen. I felt a wave of nausea mixed with a strange, cold relief. I had spent 2 years thinking I was losing my mind, while my neighbor was compiling a spreadsheet of my humiliation. Later, outside the office, I leaned against my car and looked at Evelyn. "It feels creepy," I said, my voice trembling, "knowing you were watching every time I walked out the door, like I was a bug under a microscope." Evelyn lit a cigarette, something I had never seen her do before, and shrugged. "You can be mad at me, honey. Be furious. Hate me if you want, as long as you use that book to bury him." We went back to my house to strategize. Monica had been clear we needed to file for divorce immediately, ex parte, to freeze the accounts before Gavin realized I knew. She warned me that his defense would be predictable. He would paint me as the unstable, jealous wife and Evelyn as the senile neighbor feeding my delusions. That evening, my dining room table looked like a scene from a crime procedural. Evelyn sat across from me, teaching me how to read the language of betrayal in a bank statement. "Look here," Evelyn said, pointing a manicured nail at a line item. "Withdrawal, $200, Friday, 6 in the evening." So I asked. "200 is the magic number," she explained patiently. "It is enough for a nice dinner and drinks for 2, but low enough not to trigger a fraud alert or look like a major purchase. And look at the pattern. Every other Friday? Payday. He pulls the cash so there is no credit card trail at the steakhouse. I felt a flush of heat. I thought he was working late on closings. He was closing. All right, Evelyn muttered. Just not on houses. We dug deeper. The more we looked, the more the picture cleared. It was not just cheating. It was a lifestyle funded by lies. Then, Evelyn frowned and tapped the screen. "Hello?" she whispered. "What is this?" I squinted at the row she was pointing to. It was a recurring transfer from Gavin's business account, which I technically wasn't supposed to see, but Evelyn had found a way to cross-reference it to an entity I didn't recognize. "Who is L. Bennett?" I asked. "I don't know," Evelyn said, her eyes narrowing. "But $3,000 a month is a lot of money for consulting fees to a person who doesn't seem to have a LinkedIn profile. If he is funneling company money to a personal account or a person, that is not just a divorce issue. That is embezzlement." I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. I closed the laptop. The weight of the notebooks on the table didn't feel heavy anymore. They felt solid. For the first time in years, the fog in my head was gone. "I am not crazy," I said to the empty room, realizing it was the first time I actually believed it. "No," Evelyn said, blowing a smoke ring toward the ceiling. You were just uncooperative with reality. But I think you are catching up fast. The fluorescent lights of the Riverton family court hummed with a sound that felt like a dentist's drill boring directly into my skull. I sat at the mahogany table, my hands clenched so tight in my lap that my knuckles had turned white. To my left sat Gavin. He looked impeccable in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. Next to him was his lawyer, Brent Holloway. Brent was a man who looked like he spent his weekends tanning on a yacht and his weekdays destroying people for sport. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes and the confident slouch of a man who had already won. Your Honor, Brent began, standing up and buttoning his jacket with a flourish. We are here today because Mrs. Blake is unfortunately suffering from significant emotional distress. She has become fixated on a narrative of infidelity that simply does not exist. Worse, she has fallen under the influence of an elderly neighbor, a woman known to be somewhat confused about reality. This neighbor believes she is still living in a spy novel from the 80s. He gestured vaguely toward me, his expression one of pity rather than malice. It was a masterclass in character assassination. My client is a hard-working professional, Brent continued. He has been patient. He has tried to get his wife help. But instead of therapy, she has chosen harassment. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Gavin. He caught my eye and gave me a tiny, sad smile. It was the look he gave me when I burned dinner. It said, "See, I told you so." My heart hammered against my ribs. I was going to be the crazy wife. It was happening. Then Monica Alvarez stood up. She did not bluster. She did not raise her voice. She simply picked up a thin file folder, a mere fraction of the evidence Evelyn had compiled, and walked it up to the bench. Your Honor, Monica said, her voice cool and crisp. We are not here to discuss my client's mental health. We are here to discuss the dissipation of marital assets. And while Mr. Holloway enjoys telling stories, I prefer data. She placed the folder in front of Judge Carol Whitmore. The judge was a woman of about 60 with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. She opened the folder. This is a digest of the last 3 weeks, Monica explained. It includes time-stamped photographs, GPS logs, and receipts. Judge Whitmore flipped a page, then another. She stopped. Mr. Holloway, the judge said, her voice flat. Your client's financial affidavit states that he owns no real estate property other than the marital home. Is that correct? Absolutely. Your Honor, Brent said, looking slightly confused. Then, perhaps, Monica interjected, you can explain this photograph. She held up a copy for the court. It showed Gavin, clear as day, holding hands with a woman in a red coat. They were standing in front of a sleek, modern apartment complex. He was unlocking the door. That is the entryway to Unit 4B at the Highland Towers, Monica said. And according to the county clerk's records, which I have attached, that unit was purchased 6 months ago by an entity called Blue Horizon LLC. The registered agent for that LLC is Gavin Blake. The silence in the room was absolute. Gavin's confident slouch vanished. He sat up straight, his face draining of color. Judge Whitmore looked from the photo to the financial affidavit in her hand. She looked at Gavin over the top of her reading glasses. Mr. Blake, she said, her tone dropping a few degrees. You signed this document under penalty of perjury. It says, no other properties. Brent scrambled. Your Honor, this is inadmissible. These photos, they were taken by a third party with a history of stalking. We object to the source of the source. Monica cut in sharply. Is a private citizen standing on a public sidewalk. The property records are public domain. The receipts were recovered from the trash, which, as the Supreme Court has ruled, is fair game once it hits the curb. There is no stalking here. Mr. Holloway, just very thorough neighborhood watch. Judge Whitmore held up a hand. Brent shut his mouth instantly. I am entering a temporary order, the judge said, slamming her gavel down with a sound that made me jump. I am freezing all marital assets effective immediately. That includes joint accounts, retirement funds, and yes, Mr. Blake, any accounts associated with Blue Horizon LLC. She leaned forward, locking eyes with Gavin. You have 48 hours to provide a full accounting of that LLC and any other assets you forgot to list, she said. And let me be clear. If I find out you are hiding so much as a nickel, you will not like how I divide the rest of the pie. But, Your Honor, Gavin started, his voice cracking. Step back, the judge snapped. As we walked out of the courtroom, my legs felt weak, but in a different way. The panic was gone, replaced by a cold, vibrating shock. I looked at the file in Monica's hand. We had won the skirmish, but the war had changed. This wasn't just about a cheating husband anymore. Gavin wasn't just breaking my heart. He was building a secret life with our money, and if Evelyn hadn't been watching, he would have stolen my future right out from under me. The following week turned my dining room into a command center that smelled perpetually of old paper and fresh coffee. Monica hired a forensic accountant named Steve, a man with the personality of a calculator but the eyes of a hawk. Yet, even Steve seemed deferential to Evelyn. My elderly neighbor had transitioned from witness to what I could only describe as our lead consultant. She sat at the head of the table, organizing receipts into piles while Steve tapped away on his laptop. Here is the smoking gun, Steve said, spinning his laptop around. The condo. It is not an investment property. It is a residence. It turned out the unit at Highland Towers was occupied by a woman named Madison Hale. She was 30 years old, a landscape architect, and according to the trail of emails Steve had subpoenaed, she had been with Gavin for 3 years. But the twist that made my stomach turn was not the duration. It was the deception. Madison thought Gavin was divorced. He had told her I was his ex-wife who was mentally unstable and refused to move out. Wait until you see how he paid for it, Evelyn said, sliding a sheet of paper across the table. It was a masterclass in fraud. The mortgage on the condo was being paid partially from our joint savings, but a significant chunk was coming directly from Gavin's company accounts. He had been categorizing dates with Madison as client retention dinners and networking events. Evelyn pulled out her notebook, flipping to a page from last July. July 12th. Evelyn read aloud, subject at Le Rave Bistro with the Blonde, $200 on wine. Steve nodded. Matches perfectly. He expensed a $212 dinner at Le Rêve that night as meeting with potential investors. I felt a strange, hysterical laugh bubbling up. I grabbed my phone and called Mr. Henderson, the accounting teacher at my school. I needed to understand what I was looking at. Jim, I said when he picked up between classes, hypothetically, if a husband uses company funds to buy gifts for a girlfriend, is that just cheating, or is it, tax fraud? Harper Jim asked, sounding confused. Are you writing a novel? Something like that, I replied. Just tell me. How bad is it? Well, Jim said, his voice dropping. If he is deducting personal romantic escapades as business expenses, that is tax evasion. That is fraud. That is, federal prison territory if the numbers are big enough. I hung up, feeling the blood roar in my ears. I was married to a criminal. 2 days later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I picked it up, expecting a telemarketer. Is this Harper? A voice asked. It was young, shaky, and sounded like it had been crying for hours. This is she, I said. I am Madison. The voice cracked. Madison Hale. I just got a subpoena from your lawyer. I didn't know. I swear to God, Harper, I didn't know you were still married. I gripped the phone tight. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to call her every name in the book, but listening to her sob, I realized she was just another line item in Gavin's ledger of lies. He told me you were divorced 3 years ago. Madison wept. He said you were just squatting in the house until the market improved. He even showed me papers. Fake papers, obviously. If you want to help yourself, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Send me everything, every text, every email, every picture. I will, she whispered. I will send it all. I hate him. By the next morning, Evelyn had incorporated Madison's digital dump into what we called Notebook 2.0. It was terrifying. Evelyn had created a timeline that overlaid Madison's texts with my own memories. The night he told me he was working late to secure our future was the night he texted Madison, finally free of the crazy ex, coming to you now. It read less like a love affair and more like a criminal profile. I went to see my therapist that afternoon. I sat on her beige couch, clutching a throw pillow. I want to destroy him, I admitted, staring at the floor. I want him to have nothing but my mom. She always used to say, Harper, never let your anger define who you are. Do not let the fire burn your own house down. My therapist nodded. You are not burning the house down. Harper, you are just turning on the lights. There is a difference between vengeance and justice. Which one are you looking for? I don't know, I whispered. Maybe both. The next meeting with Monica was somber. She laid out the new strategy. We are past simple divorce, Monica said, tapping her pen on the table. Because he used company funds and hid assets, you are at risk. If the IRS audits him, they come for the marital estate. We need to file for divorce, yes, but we also need to report the financial irregularities to the authorities ourselves. We have to claim innocent spouse relief. It means throwing him under the bus to save you from going down with him. Do it, I said. It will get ugly, Monica warned. He could face jail time. He should have thought about that before he expensed his mistress, Evelyn said from the corner, not looking up from her crossword puzzle. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I looked at the woman staring back at me. For years, I had been the apologetic wife, the one who said sorry when he stepped on my foot, the one who doubted her own sanity because he told her to. I took a makeup wipe and scrubbed my face clean. The woman in the mirror looked tired, yes, but her eyes were clear. No more sorry. I said to my reflection, I was done being the victim. I was done being the crazy wife. I was about to become the state's key witness, and for the first time in a long time, I liked the person I saw. Once Gavin's lawyer received the evidentiary disclosure, including a scanned copy of Evelyn's Year 2 notebook, the atmosphere shifted from a legal dispute to something darker. Gavin realized that the battered collection of papers wasn't just a diary of his affairs, it was the map of his destruction. He stopped trying to charm the judge and started trying to break me. It began with a digital siege. Gavin, who had always curated his social media to look like the perfect executive, started posting vague, melancholy status updates. It is heartbreaking to watch mental illness tear a family apart. He wrote, Please pray for Harper as she navigates her delusions. And for me, as I deal with the harassment from neighbors who feed into her paranoia. I watched friends I had known for a decade leave heart reactions on his posts. People I invited to barbecues stopped liking my photos. I wanted to scream, to post the screenshots of his texts to Madison, but Monica forbade it. Let him dig, Monica said. Judges hate a husband who plays the victim on Facebook while hiding assets in shell companies. Then, the physical intimidation began. On a Tuesday night, Evelyn's doorbell camera caught a figure in a hoodie creeping around her porch at 2 a.m. He tried the windows. He peered through the blinds. Evelyn didn't even call me in a panic. She just saved the clip, labeled it attempted intimidation, and forwarded it to the police. He is looking for the archives. Evelyn told me the next morning over coffee. He thinks if he burns the books, the problems go away. 2 days later, I was in the middle of a lecture on the Reconstruction era when my phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket. It was Evelyn. I stepped into the hall. "You need to come home," Evelyn said, her voice tight. "The police are already on their way." I drove home with my heart in my throat. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a patrol car and Gavin standing on the lawn, red-faced and gesturing wildly at two officers. Evelyn stood on her porch, arms crossed, looking like a statue of judgment. It turned out Gavin had kicked in the back door of my house while he thought the street was empty. He had torn my home office apart. Drawers were pulled out, files were scattered across the floor, and my laptop was smashed. He had been looking for the notebooks. But he was an idiot. The originals were in a fireproof safe at Monica's firm. He had risked a felony for a stack of photocopies. Evelyn walked over to me as I got out of the car. "He thought he was clever," she said, lighting a cigarette with a steady hand. "Mrs. Gable next door saw the door ajar and called me. I went in. I saw the mess. And then I checked the nanny cam." I looked at her, confused. "I don't have a nanny cam." "Evelyn, we don't have kids." "I know," Evelyn said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "I installed it inside your bookshelf last week while we were looking for financial records. Just a little insurance policy. I didn't tell you because I wanted your reaction to be genuine if asked. It recorded everything. Harper. Him breaking the lock. Him trashing the room. Him screaming, 'Where is it?' at the empty desk." Gavin saw me and lunged forward, though the officer held him back. "This is my house," Gavin shouted, spit flying from his lips. "I pay the mortgage. I have a right to enter my own home." "Actually, sir," the officer said, stepping between us, "you are in violation of a temporary exclusion order issued by the family court. And now, you are also looking at charges for breaking and entering and criminal mischief." Gavin looked at me, his eyes wild, pleading. "Harper, tell them I was just getting my things. Tell them you are overreacting for the first time in our marriage." I looked at him and didn't feel the urge to fix it. I didn't feel the need to smooth things over or apologize to the officers for the trouble. I looked at his desperate, sweating face, and I didn't see my husband. I saw a subject. I saw Subject Gavin Blake. Just another line in Evelyn's notebook. "Officer," I said, my voice flat and cold. "I would like to press charges, and I want to make sure the judge gets a copy of the police report before our hearing on Friday." Gavin's jaw dropped. He looked at me like I had slapped him. "You are crazy," he screamed as they cuffed him. "You and that old hag are crazy," as the cruiser pulled away. Evelyn opened her notebook. She turned to the current date and uncapped her pen. "Subject arrested for violation of court order," she narrated as she wrote. "Video evidence secured. Note to self, send flowers to Mrs. Gable for the heads up." I watched the police car disappear around the corner. Gavin kept trying to save himself, but every move he made just dug the hole deeper, and for the first time, I was happy to hand him the shovel. Brent Holloway looked like a man who had realized he was bringing a knife to a drone strike. He sat across from us in the sterile conference room, loosening his tie as he slid a piece of paper across the table. "Look," Brent said, his voice lacking its usual arrogant purr. "Gavin is willing to be generous. We split the marital assets 50-50. He keeps the condo and the business entities. You keep the house and your teacher's pension. We seal the record. Everyone walks away with their dignity." I looked at the paper. It was a joke. "Dignity." Monica laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Your client broke into my client's home last week. He is currently facing criminal charges. And you want 50-50. We are not accepting anything less than 70-30, plus legal fees, plus full disclosure of the LLC assets." "That is unreasonable," Brent sputtered. "You are banking on a judge believing a notebook written by a geriatric shut-in." "No," Monica said, leaning forward. "We are banking on Laura." Brent froze. "Who Laura Bennett?" Monica said, dropping a new file onto the table. "Former junior accountant at Skyline Vista. The one Gavin fired 3 months ago for asking too many questions about his entertainment expenses." It was the final piece of the puzzle. Laura had contacted Monica 2 days ago, having heard rumors about the scandalous divorce ripping through the local real estate community. She had been fired for insubordination, but she had kept a backup of her work logs. We had spent the previous afternoon cross-referencing Laura's internal spreadsheets with Evelyn's external observations. It was devastatingly perfect. On October 4th, Evelyn's notebook recorded subject at Starling Motel with Redhead, 2 hours. Laura's spreadsheet recorded client retention dinner. Expense report filed by G. Blake, $250. Location: the Chop House downtown. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was stealing from his company to pay for it. We have the internal logs, Monica told Brent, whose face had gone a sickly shade of gray, and we are attaching them to our financial statement. And, just so you know, we are legally obligated to send a courtesy copy to the legal department at Skyline Vista. We wouldn't want to be accused of hiding evidence of corporate fraud, would we? Brent closed his briefcase. He didn't say another word. He just walked out. Gavin, however, wasn't done. He texted me an hour later, begging for 5 minutes at the coffee shop near my school. He promised he would sign whatever I wanted if I just heard him out. Against Monica's advice, I went. I needed to look him in the eye one last time. He was sitting in the back booth, looking smaller than I remembered. He tried to smile, that same dazzling smile that had charmed me 7 years ago, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Harper," he said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. "Remember our honeymoon in Cabo? Remember how we promised to fight for each other? I made mistakes. I know that. But you are letting this get out of hand. That old woman, she is poisoning you." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper. "Think about it. Harper, if this goes to trial, you are going to look insane." A jealous wife relying on a stalker's diary. No one will believe you. You will be the laughingstock of Riverton. I took a sip of my black coffee. It was bitter, but it cleared my head. I looked at the man I had shared a bed with, the man I had defended to my friends, the man I had loved more than myself. "You are done." "Gavin," I said calmly. "I can change," he pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead. I will go to therapy. I don't want you to change," I said, standing up. "And I don't want your apology. I want you to pay. Every cent. Every lie. I am leaving the rest to the judge." I walked out of the coffee shop. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. That night, the eve of the trial, I sat on Evelyn's porch. The air was cool, smelling of rain and impending autumn. Evelyn had the notebook on her lap, her hand resting on the cover like she was protecting a Bible. "Are you scared?" she asked, looking at the dark street. "No," I said, and I meant it. "Good," Evelyn said. "Because tomorrow isn't just about money. It is about the record. Once I read this into the court transcript, it leaves my hands and becomes history. It becomes public. That is the punishment men like him fear most. Not losing money, losing their mask." She closed the notebook with a final heavy thud. It sounded like a gavel falling. "Let's go get him," she whispered. I looked at the thick stack of paper. It was a bomb, ticking away the seconds of Gavin's life. And tomorrow, we were going to detonate it. The courtroom was buzzing. It seemed the rumor mill in Riverton was efficient because the gallery was packed with lawyers and curious locals who had heard about the notebook divorce. I walked down the aisle, the heels of my shoes clicking against the floor. I felt like an actress stepping onto a stage, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't playing the role of the victim. I was the prosecutor. Monica Alvarez wasted no time. She didn't use emotional language. She didn't call Gavin a monster. She simply set up a timeline that was as cold and sharp as a scalpel. She displayed a digital version of Evelyn's charts on the projector screen. 2 years, Monica said, pointing to the screen. 730 days. In that time, Mr. Blake withdrew $42,000 in untraceable cash. He spent $15,000 on hotels, and he lied to his wife approximately 3 times a day. Then, Evelyn took the stand. Gavin's lawyer, Brent, tried to rattle her. He asked if she was confused. He asked if she often imagined things. "Mr. Holloway," Evelyn said, adjusting her glasses. "I spent 30 years tracking money laundering for the federal government. I know the difference between imagination and a paper trail. Your client is not a ghost. He is just a sloppy criminal." Brent sat down, looking defeated. But Monica wasn't done. She pulled out a single sheet of paper from a sealed envelope. It was a copy of a page from the notebook we hadn't discussed in the settlement meetings. "Your Honor," Monica said, her voice dropping an octave. "We have established the infidelity. We have established the fraud. But on August 3rd, Mrs. Rhodes recorded a meeting between Mr. Blake and a life insurance broker at a local bar. The witness noted that Mr. Blake was inquiring about doubling the payout on his wife's policy." A gasp went through the room. I felt a chill run down my spine, even though I knew it was coming. "And," Monica continued, 2 hours later, the search history on the burner phone we recovered shows a query for car accidents that look like driver error." Gavin jumped up. "That is a lie. I never searched that." "Sit down," the bailiff barked. Monica turned to the judge. "We are not charging him with conspiracy to commit murder today, Your Honor. But this pattern of deception, financial desperation, and disregard for Harper's safety proves that my client has every reason to be terrified." When Gavin finally took the stand, he was sweating through his expensive suit. He tried to laugh it off. "This is ridiculous," Gavin stammered, pointing at the notebook. "It is fan fiction. It is the ramblings of a bored, lonely old woman who hates men." Monica didn't argue. She just handed him a bank statement. "On September 9th, the notebook says you were at the Ritz with Madison Hale. This statement shows a room service charge for champagne and strawberries at the Ritz on September 9th. Is the bank writing fan fiction too? Mr. Blake." Gavin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the judge, then at me, and finally crumbled. Judge Whitmore had seen enough. She raised her hand, silencing the room. She picked up the notebook and read a passage aloud. "Subject laughing while wife cries on phone?" The judge read. She looked at Gavin. "This isn't imagination. Mr. Blake, this is a behavioral pattern, and this pattern has a price." The gavel came down with a sound that felt like a gunshot. "I am awarding the marital home and all contents to Mrs. Quinn." The judge ruled, "Mr. Blake will retain his business entities, but he will owe Mrs. Quinn a lump sum of $85,000 to repay the marital assets he dissipated. Furthermore, I am forwarding the evidence regarding Blue Horizon LLC to the district attorney's office for investigation into tax fraud." She leaned over the bench, her eyes locking onto Gavin. "You are not losing everything because you had an affair, sir," Judge Whitmore said. "You are being punished because you thought you stood above the law and above the intelligence of the women you underestimated." I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. Evelyn was waiting by the steps, the notebook closed and tucked under her arm. We didn't hug. We didn't cheer. She just looked at me and gave a single, sharp nod. I nodded back. The story wasn't about destroying a man. It was about refusing to let him destroy me. I turned and walked toward the parking lot, my head high, ready to start a life where the only person writing my story was me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below where you are listening from. I would love to chat with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button so more people can hear this story.